Hello, fellow Monster Girl hunters. Today we will be going over Beastmen, Minotaur, Ulster, and Sphinx. The Minotaur in ancient Greece, in Latin Minotaurus, is a mythical creature portrayed in classical times with the head and tail of a bull and the body of a man, or as described by Roman poet Ovid, a being part man and part bull. He dwells at the center of the labyrinth, which was an elaborate maze-like construction designed by the architect Daedalus and his son Icarus on the command of King Minos. Crete. The Minotaur was eventually killed by the Athenian hero Theseus. After ascending to the throne of the island of Crete, Minos competed with his brother as ruler. Minos prayed to the sea god Poseidon to send him a snow-white bull as a sign of the god's favor. Minos was to sacrifice the bull to honor Poseidon, but owing the bull's beauty, he decided to keep him. Minos believed that the god would accept a substandard sacrifice. To punish Minos, Poseidon made Minos' wife fall in love with the bull. His wife had the craftsman Daedalus fashion a hollow wooden cow, which she climbed into in order to mate with the bull. The monstrous Minotaur was the result. His wife nursed the Minotaur, but he grew in size and became furious. As the unnatural offspring of a woman and a beast, the Minotaur had no natural source of nourishment and thus devoured humans for substance. Minos, following advice from the oracle Delphi, had Daedalus construct a gigantic labyrinth to hold the Minotaur. It is located under Minos' palace in Knossos. The Minotaur is commonly represented in classical art. Body of a man and the head and tail of a bull, according to Sophocles' Tranican. When the river spirit Penelos used funerary, one of the guises he assumed was a man with the head of a bull. In classical times, through the Renaissance, the Minotaur appears in the center of many depictions of the labyrinth. What is his Latin account of the Minotaur, which did not describe which half was bull and which man, was most widely available during the Middle Ages, and several later versions show a man's head and a torso of a bull. The reverse classical, reminiscent of a centaur. This alternative tradition survived into the Renaissance and still figures in some modern depictions, such as Billy Savage's illustration Edith Hamilton's mythology. From Monster Girl Encyclopedia by Kinku Cross. The Minotaur is a beast human with cattle characteristics. Minotaurs are monstrous warriors known to wield gigantic weapons with formidable ease. They are rough in temperament and tend to act as they please without careful thought. For this reason, they are very dangerous. When a Minotaur sees a man who meets her fancy, she immediately charges and takes him for her own. A Minotaur's endurance is boundless, and she delights in violating men with as much force as she can muster. Thus, a man caught by a Minotaur must resign himself to submission until he faints from exhaustion. It is important to note that Minotaurs are aroused to even greater violence by the color red. A man who wears red before a Minotaur is almost certain to become the sole target of her furious desire to fill herself to the brim with his sex and seed. However, though Minotaurs are dangerous creatures, they are fond of sleep and do not wake easily. In most encounters with a Minotaur, one will find them sleeping. They spend most of the day in slumber, even right after eating or having sex. A Minotaur is likely to doze off with her sexual partner still in her arms. The man may find himself unable to escape, therefore treated as her husband. Minotaurs are highly indolent, rarely showing interest in matters other than food, sleep, and sexual intercourse, the only three things they are particularly passionate about. In particular, Minotaurs who have acquired husbands seem to think of sexual intercourse with them almost continuously. When they are not having sex, it is quite likely they can either be found eating or sleeping. Minotaurs seem to take supreme joy in sleeping with their husband in their arms, especially after an exhausting day of intercourse. Later, when she opens her eyes and sees the face of the man she loves, she cannot help but climb atop him once more. Thus, her day begins and ends in carnal wonder, after which she drifts off once more into comfortable and well-deserved sleep with her man in her arms, the cycle beginning anew. Next is Hollister, which does not exist outside of the monster girls. So there is no mythology to bring up. Hollister are a variety of minotaur with distinctive black and white coats. Unlike the minotaur, their violence has mellowed over the course of their evolution. They have chosen to live under the human hand and are correspondingly docile in character and rarely attack humans. However, like minotaurs, they are unskilled at deep thought and tend to behave idly. They spend most of their time sleeping, feeding, or engaging in sexual intercourse. Wild Hollisters wander about, constantly searching for a man to be their master. Upon finding a man they like, they will live with him among human settlements or nearby. Hollisters often press their enormous breast against a man. This is their way of expressing affection. Squeezing their breast is considered a sign of emotional reciprocation and is enthusiastically welcomed. When a Hollister presses her breast against a man with special force, it is a sign she desires to mate. Hollisters try to respect the wishes of their masters, so the man is free to ignore her entreaties if they so choose. However, though they might be docile, Holisters are monsters with inhuman sexual appetites, so they only withstand being ignored for so long. Thus, a docile Hollister who has repeatedly rebuffed will turn violent and attack the man in order to mate non-consensually. She will remain intractable until the entirety of her long accumulated pool of libido has been depleted. Another trait the Hollister shares with the Minotaur is its arousal by the color red. Prolonged exposure to the color causes Hollisters to become violent for a time, as if she remembers she was once a Minotaur, leading her to attack, much in the manner of the original Minotaur, who is also impassioned by extended exposure by color red. However, when the Hollister is so aroused, she maintains her instinct to seek her husband. It is said that if a Hollister with a husband becomes aroused by something red, she will charge across any distance in order to find him. Hollisters can produce milk from their breast without having children. Their milk not only exceeds almost any other in flavor and nutrition, but also boosts potency. It is highly sought after by both men and monsters. A man who bides with a Hollister will find that he will need nothing more than her milk to keep himself healthy. Up next is the Sphinx. Sphinx, plural sphinxes, or sphinx, is a mythological creature with a head of a human, falcon, cat, or a sheep, and the body of a lion with the wings of an eagle. In Greek tradition, the Sphinx was headed by a woman, the haunches of a lion, and the wings of a bird. She is mythicized as treacherous and merciless, and will kill and eat those who cannot answer her riddle. The deadly version of the Sphinx appears in the myth and drama of Odysseus. Unlike the Great Sphinx, the Egyptian Sphinx is typically shown as a man. In tradition, the Egyptian Sphinx is viewed as benevolent, but having a furious strength similar to the malevolent Greece. Both were thought of as guardians and often flank the entrance temples. In European decorative art, the Sphinx enjoyed a minor revival during the Renaissance. Later, the Sphinx image, initially very similar to the original ancient Egyptian concept, was exported into many other cultures, albeit they often interpreted quite different translations, descriptions of the original, and though the evolution of the concept is related to other cultural traditions. Sphinx depictions are generally associated with agricultural structures, architectural structures such as royal tombs or religious tombs. It is said in late lore that Hora, and Ares sent the Sphinx from her Athenian homeland, foreign origin of the Sphinx, Thebes in Greece, where she asked all passerby the most famous riddle: which creature has one voice and yet becomes four-footed, two-footed, and three-footed? She strangled and devoured anyone that could not answer. Odysseus solved the riddle by answering man, who crawls on all fours as a baby, walks on 2 feet as an adult, and then uses a walking stick in old age. By some accounts, but much more rarely, there is a second riddle. There are 2 sisters, one gives birth to the other, and she, in turn, gives birth to the first. Who are the 2 sisters? The answer is day and night. The second riddle is also found in Gascon version, the myth, and could be very ancient. Tested at last, the Sphinx then threw itself from a high rock and died. An alternative version tells that she devoured herself. In both cases, Odysseus can therefore be recognized as a threshold figure, helping affect the translation between the old religion and religious practices represented by the death of the Sphinx and the rise of the new Olympian gods. From Monster Girl Encyclopedia, the Sphinx is a kind of werecat that lives in the deserts. Like other members of the cat family, Sphinxes possess astounding physical dexterity and excel in intellect and magic. Their role is to guard the ruins where a pharaoh sleeps. In concert with the Anubis, guardian of the interior, the Sphinx guards the exterior, cursing those who approach the wrecked. Sphinx casts a powerful curse of beguilement on any man who heads for the pharaoh's resting place. This curse comes in the form of a riddle. Any who answer the riddle incorrectly will be cursed and with lust for the Sphinx. He will long for her embrace and offer up his body to the whims of her lust. On the other hand, if the man does answer the riddle correctly, the curse is placed upon the riddler, the Sphinx. However, all this means is that she will long to make love to him in the same manner as other monsters. Straddling his hips, she will ride him in a wild, beastly fashion, as if to punish him for approaching the ruins. In so doing, she extracts his essence. Meanwhile, other curses may be placed. The Sphinx poses more riddles upon the man destabilized by her devastating pleasure, too sated to even understand her questions, much less answer them. Thus, he will be even more objectively enthralled by the Sphinx and her curse. Sphinxes often pose riddles in the that function differently than the curse described above. Such exchanges tend to be determined by the success of the partner's answer. While a deleterious effect is not always the result of a wrong answer, as in the case of the curse, answering a Sphinx's riddle correctly is nevertheless likely to prove advantageous when conversing with her. Unlike the Anubis, the Sphinx has little loyalty to the pharaoh and puts her desire to find a man before her guard duty. She ignores any woman who approaches the ruin, leaving them for the Anubis. Men, however, she milks for their seed. If they are to her liking, she will forsake her post and take them to her chambers for extended intercourse. If she decides to make him her husband, he will rarely be found at her post, choosing instead to stay inside to couple with her husband. Reports say that some Sphinxes have been so taken by men who correctly answer their riddle that they abandon the ruins entirely and even help them rob the tomb. Well, thank you very much for joining me. See you again. Tell your friends. Hit like, follow, whatever.